Welcome to the Supported Living Property Podcast with your host, me, Lisa Brown, the place to learn about supported living property investing. Hi, Henry. It's great to have you here today. How are you?
Yes, Lisa, brilliant. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, it's good to have you here. We've got lots to cover, haven't we? So for people who don't know you, do you want to introduce yourself and tell people a bit about you?
Yes, so I'm Henry Davies, and I'm the MD of Genie Developments Limited. Basically, I'm a property developer based in Liverpool, and I've been operating in the Liverpool and before that, the London market, believe it or not. I bought my first property in London in the early 90s. So property development is my main business, usually large HMOs. But on top of that, I also present property investment training courses on behalf of the NRLA. And I also do a bit of mentoring, one-to-one mentoring. And final plug, Lisa, I also have a book. It's called The Truth About Property, and it's available on Amazon. And that book is really an honest insight. It's kind of like me being really truthful about people, basically saying to people, listen, guys, here's the truth. You can do it, but here's the truth. Here's what you really need to know. And it's just an honest, impartial guide, basically.
Fantastic. And we'll put the links in the show notes so people can find those things if they want
Thank
to,
you.
Henry. So you've got a wealth of experience in property, covering lots of different property cycles and different periods within, so principally, what kind of properties have you done when you're talking about property developing? And what sort of property?
Yeah, I have done just about every type of property you can do: HMOs, apartments, commercial property, etc., supported living of recent. So I've done most types of things over the years, and I have been through the cycles. And the very, very first property I bought in London, that property actually went down in price. And then in 2007, we had another property crash. And for those years, I was based in Dublin because I had a Dublin-based company to take advantage of the 12% corporation tax. And mainly then I went through a phase of a few years where I was buying blocks of apartments from other developers. I would haggle the best price I could, get a good deal, and then I would resell them on to investors myself. And that was my business model for years. And that was a really good business model because, strictly speaking, I didn't have to be the developer. I was just trading on the blocks, basically.
Was that in Ireland, those
No,
blocks you're buying?
that was all based here.
Right.
The business was here, but I was based in Ireland so that I could take advantage of the 12% corporation tax.
Right. Okay.
Even though the business was here, I was based there to
Right.
take advantage of the tax rates. It was all UK property, basically. Yes.
Right. Okay. So it's always been UK property that you've
Yes, absolutely.
been
Yeah.
interested in. And so we've obviously, this is the Supported Living Property Podcast. We've been in contact about supported living, and that's been a fairly recent discovery of yours, hasn't it? Or is that something you've been aware of for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I have been aware of it for many decades, but I never did anything about it. And I did a deal just on 2 years ago, and it was my first deal. And it was a large HMO and in Manchester. And basically, it worked out really well for me because the supported living client have been brilliant to work for. As you know, you may not know, maybe it's not the same in all cases, but in my case, they pay the rent, they pay the utilities, they pay the insurance, etc. So it's been a really good relationship for me. And obviously the positive slant on that, maybe Lisa, I'll end up going to heaven because of this, is that I get to give my property to people who are in need and who are vulnerable. Because, obviously I am a developer and, I want to make money, but, that does matter as well.
So how did you come across that supported living? How did that property end up being leased by a provider?
Yeah, okay. So I had heard about it, posts on Facebook, etc. Heard about your group as well, and I think I went on your website. I contacted you originally, etc. And I'd heard about it through the grapevine, and I'd heard of other developers who were renting to supported living clients. But I was Billy No Mates in the industry. I knew nobody, had no contacts, and knew very little. So I went on this 4-month journey of basically contacting anybody and everybody with a pulse that knew anything about supported living. And I literally contacted everybody, LinkedIn, you name it. And everybody was absolutely brilliant and helpful. And in particular, the local council as well. I contacted Liverpool Council and Manchester Council, and I absolutely smashed it, met as many people as I could. Now, it was a bit of a journey. I had a few deals that were agreed or nearly agreed that didn't happen in the end. And although a lot of the supported living providers say, oh, we're really desperate for properties, none of them would ever come back to you quickly and say, oh, yes, we can make a decision. It was quite a drawn out process, and I was a bit surprised by that. But in the end, we got there. And it took a lot of work, though, a lot of work and detail. And there was one point where I was thinking, I'm not going to bother anymore because it's just not happening. And then it did in the end. And I'm glad I stuck with it because it gives me confidence now that I can repeat the model.
I think it's one of those things, it does take a lot longer from a property investor point of
Yes.
view to get set up, doesn't it, than just leasing your property to private tenants. And I think it's investing that time up front, looking at that long-term benefit, isn't it? I think that's the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely, Lisa. But I don't think, is there a central database? Like, let's say in Liverpool and Manchester, I believe it's community interest companies I need to find, but also they may not be community interest companies. They make normal profit. So is there a database on your local council list with all the providers that's comprehensive?
No, and that's the
Right.
problem. There's not one place you can go to because
Yeah.
it's not just CICs, community interest companies. Some of them might be charities, some of them might be
Yes.
registered housing associations.
Yeah.
They might be charities and CICs as well as housing associations, and
Right.
some of them are limited companies. So there isn't just one point of reference to go to. On some local authority websites, you can find some of this information. You can find who are their preferred partners, who they like working with. But there's lots and lots of different places to go to find this information, but it is really hard to
Yeah,
find.
but Lisa, if you knew the type of charity or organizations, could you search them? For example, I'm guessing if you have to have a children's home, you have to have some type of qualification.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing that qualification will be listed on a certain website. Would that be a way of doing it, or?
Certainly, you can search the CQC website, you can search the Regulator of Social Housing website. They're not very user-friendly from a
Right.
searching point of view.
Yeah.
But I've written, because I get asked this so much, Henry, and I'm sure most people listening will have heard it, but there's a guide on my website you can download that just talks about how to find providers. It gives you the Google search terms, the places to go. Just because I get asked it so much, I thought it was easier
Brilliant.
just to create it there. So
Yes.
that's all there for anyone.
Well, sorry for asking you the same old boring
No,
question.
not at all. It's a really important question, and it is something that, like I said, I'm asked a lot. So it's not like it's it is something that people
Yeah,
are
because maybe
concerned
you could
about.
work on a database, Lisa, and charge a few quid for accessing that database.
But then that's what we do in the network is we bring
Yes.
people together. But we don't that database is, you can imagine some people would get hold of that information and then just spam every single
Yeah,
person on that
true, true,
list. And if you
true.
were a provider, those providers are busy at the moment. They're
Yeah,
working really hard. They're doing
yeah,
5 other jobs as well as trying to find the
I
properties.
understand. Yeah, yeah.
So they don't actually want to have 100 emails from property investors speculating potentially. They want to speak to the property investor who can actually work with them,
Good
who is
point.
actually going to help them.
Good point.
Yeah, it's challenging though. It's not, there's not a magic simple answer, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a lot about timing because, when you contact a provider, they have the requirement at that time and you have the property about that time. It's just a bit of timing as well, I felt too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it varies, doesn't it? Like you said, the demand comes and goes for the providers, what they actually need, what's being
Yes,
funded, what's in vogue almost as well at the moment.
yes.
What's the commissioner commissioning in that area? What do they like? What don't they like? What types of properties? It
Yeah, and the
changes all the
funding that they have as well, because I hope obviously to achieve just a market rent, that would be my target basically.
time. And you see, and I think that's something that people don't always understand, isn't it? So a lot of developers are thinking they're going to get this really high rent. They're going to expecting to have this very, very high level rent, higher than market rent. But you found that the deals are working for you well on a market rent rate. Is that right?
Yeah, if I'm honest though, I've probably ended up with more because I got market rent, but they pay the utility costs. So when you balance that out, it probably was a good deal in that context.
Mm,
But my particular property, they're high spec properties. So it's fitted out. Every room is made to measure furniture. Any rooms that are slightly small, say under 10 square meters, they have what's called open wardrobes. The bed itself, the base of the bed is a full storage bed. It's not one of these cheap pull-out drawers. It's got what's called a pull-up flap. and the room is designed with, all rooms have a table like you'd see in a hotel, and a chair and a place to do your makeup for if you're a lady, you know what I mean? And it's fitted out professionally, and I do give above the standard that would be required. And I know lots of people say to me, "Oh, Henry, you're going over the top. You're not living in the place. It's a business," and that's fine. But at the end of the day, these people are vulnerable people, and I feel better doing it that way. You know what I mean? Because obviously I have to make a profit, but I'm not trying to skin every last cent out of the deal, basically.
And I don't think you need to in supported living, because when you're looking at that longer term view, like how long have they leased your property for, Henry?
5 years, 5 years.
So you're looking at the fact you've got no voids over those 5 years. They're probably covering wear and tear as well. Are they within that lease?
Well, they are, but I don't know how that will work in practical terms at the end of the 5 years if they were to leave. So, but yes, yeah, hopefully they are.
And so therefore, actually, you look at your costs are going to be lower, aren't they, over that period of time? If you're running
Absolutely.
HMOs, you run other HMOs. What are your voids rates normally within your HMOs?
Well, luckily they're zero basically,
Are they?
and they have
Yeah.
been for years. But I have worked really hard on my business model to get to that point. Most of my rooms are en suite. Most of them are a reasonable size. They're all professionally interior designed, all professionally fitted, and they don't look like buy-to-let rooms. Because unfortunately, most landlords, what they do is they go to B&Q, they get the grey carpet, they get the brick tiles in the bathroom, and they get all the cheap fittings, and it looks like a buy to let. It doesn't feel homely. I put some art in it, stuff like that. I play around with colors a little bit, so it's not all just neutral. And I try to make them homely as possible as I can, so that they're attractive places for people to live, basically.
And that's what makes a big difference. And that will also have appealed to the provider you're working with, I'm sure, and they would have seen that extra effort you've gone to in that property. Tell us a little bit more about this property that you've leased. What is it? What was
Yeah.
it originally? And
So it's a large HMO. It's a 16-bed HMO, and it was a former office block, basically, which I turned each floor into a HMO. And each floor is effectively a self-contained, apartment with 4 rooms. And it's got some space around the back, amenity space with, like, we have a bench and stuff and a bike store. And it's a nice property. It's a self-contained property. It's on its own, and recently totally developed, as I mentioned already. And each room has been actually designed specifically, because I've done this so many times that I've become, better at my interiors. And what I would do is the architect will do a plan. He will design each room, and then I will go in and, edit and adjust the design to get it perfect. And a simple example of that would be, say if you ever went to a hotel, it's a smallish room, there might be a big table in there. It's totally the wrong size, because what's happened is the architect has drawn it in the plan. It looks okay in the plan, but when you actually go to the room, it's not the appropriate size. And so I work on the sizing of each thing for each room. And it's something I've done over the years to try and get the rooms to the maximum they can be, basically.
so it's 4 different 4-bed flats, essentially,
Effectively, yes.
which are all,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
they each will have their own kitchen space and their own.
Yeah, they have the self-contained flats, and basically, as in each room, there's different clients, I believe, and they're just 4 normal flats, but it's rented on the basis of each one is a HMO room, effectively, and they pay me HMO room rates, basically.
And the provider that's taken it, what kind of tenants are going to be in the property? What's their support need? Do you know?
Their support need is people who are recovering from drug and alcohol abuse, and I believe these people who are in my property are at the end of the program. They're kind of like, they've done the program, they've got results, and they're going out to live in the normal community after they move out from my property. So it's good to know that, that something is being used in that way to help people, because, and it's not only people who have drug and alcohol abuses, it's also people who suffer breakdowns. And I was there one day, and an interesting story. I was just parked outside, and a guy came out of the property, and he got into his BMW and stuff. And I got chatting to him briefly, and he just said, "I've had a breakdown, had a relationship breakdown, had a few issues, and my life just went." And I thought, wow, there by the grace of God we all go.
Oh, all of
There
us,
by the
absolutely.
grace of God we go. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow. And I was amazed that he opened up and told me and stuff, and you know, it really set me back. I really thought about it afterwards, because he was kind of a businessman, a bit like me. He had a nice car. He had interest in cars like I have. I'm a petrol head, and I used to be a racing driver, and I'm big into Formula One. And we just got chatting about Formula One, and I felt, you know, wow, there by the grace of God we go. I go. I am lucky.
Yeah. It's very easy to think that people in supported living are other to us. They're different.
Yes.
They're, you know, but actually, like you say, it can be any of us, can't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And some people have not had the breaks in life in their childhood. And I feel so sorry for those people. And even when I see a program on TV, let's say it's about a children's home, I can't even watch it. I
No.
cannot even watch it, because I have a 12-year-old, and I couldn't even think about her being in that position. I can't even
No.
comprehend it.
No. No. It's
It's
yeah.
cruel.
It is. It's really harsh, isn't it?
Yeah.
Going back to the property, Henry, was there anything that the provider asked you to do different in the property? Did you have to do any changes for this provider?
No, there was no access requirements or anything like that.
Mm.
Basically, they were pretty easy to work with. I know. I think some providers may have access
Mm. Mm.
requirements if some of the clients have disabilities, but I don't think that was the case in this case. And they were blown away by the quality of the property, and they say it's the best property and it's their most popular. And because I've been proactive with them and making it, you know, the best it can be, I have a good relationship with them, because they see I'm trying to do the right thing as a
Mm.
landlord and
Mm.
keep standards high as well. And even things like the windows outside, I mean, they hadn't cleaned them, you know, they just hadn't bothered, but I just got a window cleaning company to do it, you know, and they were grateful of that, you know, just small things like that, because I
Mm.
appreciate them as a client, and I want to show them respect.
Mm. And I think there's a lot in there, isn't there, about that two-way relationship that you're building there, you know, and how important that is so that you can go on and potentially, are they interested in leasing more properties,
Yes,
Henry?
they are. And I've got a 24 bed at the moment that I'm discussing with them, and nothing signed yet, but I do have another 24 bed coming up in Liverpool area, and that would be ideal for supported living. It's over 3 floors. It's close to city centre. So if anybody's listening on that, just look me up, Henry Davies Property, and you'll find me.
For a lot of providers, that's going to be too big, those sizes, and even the 16 is going to be quite big. But I think because of the type of tenants you're talking about, you know, they've got a lower support need by the time they're kind of this further on in their journey.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I'm also talking to a provider about it, where they have different requirements from different agencies. One of the agencies is the NHS, where
Mm.
people are well enough to go out of hospital, but they don't have a place to go, and they can
Mm.
put them in my property temporarily. And then they also have a requirement for their normal clients as well. So there's 3 floors. It's almost like 3 buildings, really, basically.
Mm. And I think that's where it works better rather than having, if it was one property, one 16-bed property or 24-bed property, you
Yes.
know, it would be an awful lot of people in one space, wouldn't it? Whereas the fact that they're broken into
Yes,
self-contained
they're
units.
individual floors. Each floor has a kitchen as well, and some of them are self-contained, some of them are not. So, and you know, I'm looking at providers there, and I'm finding as well, Lisa, that there's companies like from London as well that operate in the Liverpool and Manchester area, which I was surprised how that worked as well. Is that a common thing? Because I assumed that all be local companies, you know, who have a contract with the local authority. But is that not the case, or?
No, there's lots of national providers. There's the lots of national care companies and housing associations who work across the whole country and have
Yeah.
contracts with lots of different local authorities. Or some will just pick a few areas. So they maybe have two or three different, they have like hub areas that they work in where
Yes.
they can maintain properties better. And, you know, I think you have to obviously do your due diligence carefully when you're working with providers and make sure that you're selecting someone who isn't too thinly spread across the
Yes.
country, you know, that they don't just have here and there, but actually can't maintain that property and staff it well.
Yes. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's
I
the
understand.
concern when you're looking sometimes at the national providers, but a lot of the very big providers are well staffed, well resourced and all over the space. So
Yeah, yeah, and there's also short-term accommodation as well for not necessarily asylum seekers. I think there's councils have a requirement where somebody turns up at the council office and say, "Listen, can you house us? We don't have any place to go." And instead of putting them into a hotel, they put them into, you know, Airbnbs and accommodation, etc. I think that's a big business as well, I believe.
that's like more like emergency accommodation. I think that's
Yes.
normally called, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And there's a huge huge need for that at the moment. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, that's
It's a
something
big
I've come
problem.
across as well. But generally speaking, in my case, Liverpool Council and Manchester Council were quite helpful. You know, they were helpful, and they were good people to deal with.
That's good, because a lot of people find they get a bit stonewalled when they approach the local authorities. They find it hard to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of natural because unless you go after people, they get so many emails. It's just easier for them not to reply and forget about it. So I think with me, I did a bit of networking as well. And in my case, I met one of the head of housing at an NRLA networking event as well, which helped.
Mm,
So yes, you do get stonewalled a bit, but if you keep going, you will make connections. And you know, the obvious thing from your own network, you know, I put it out to my own network. I have a private networking group called Developers Club, and I ask people in there who do they know? Have you got any contacts? And also things on LinkedIn. I did posts on LinkedIn
mm.
saying, you know, I've got this property. Anybody interested? And I had lots of inquiries from that as well. So you kind of have to work on it, as you say, and put it out there until you start making the connections.
And I think it's also having that credibility because of your background, because of, you know, that people can see that you can deliver. I think there's a lot of new developers coming into this space. Oh, shiny new thing, I'm going to get involved in supported living,
Yes.
but actually don't have a track record. So the providers are going to do due diligence on you too. They're going to make sure that you're someone they want to work with, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose it does help. You know, I probably have more experience than most people in terms of development and trading and the different stuff I've done over the years. And you know, for me, credibility is a big thing because, you know, it's all about personal relationships.
Mm.
And for me, it's easier to do the right thing than do the wrong thing. And I'm always fascinated by people who just like the standards they keep in property. It's just like, it's pointless. It's counterproductive, even if you are a penny pincher and don't care about people, which is wrong. It's counterproductive.
Mm.
And
It's not good
unfortunately,
business if nothing else, is it?
if nothing else, yeah, absolutely. And it's just easier to do things right and provide good quality service and good quality accommodation for people. And I try and future-proof the properties as well. I do things like anything with a moving part, for example, would have to have a 5-year warranty. Even if it's a thing like even like a shower thermostat. Because I find, you know, with HMOs, everything gets more abuse than usual and everything gets broken. Eventually it breaks. So I try and think, right, what's the most likely chance things will break? Obviously, the obvious one, like washing machines, are the biggest bane of my life. Washing machines and fridges. Oh my God. I
And
mean,
you've supplied those into this supported living property as well,
yes,
have you?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And yeah, and I supply that with all my HMOs, and I
Mhm.
try and put long warranty or else branded stuff. But it's expensive, like to put some of the branded stuff. Like the only appliance that doesn't break is Miele, but it's
Mm.
2,000 quid for a Miele washing machine. So it's
Yeah.
just not practical. So the next best would be maybe a Bosch or something equivalent, basically.
Mm. Mm. That's good advice for people. Um, and so you're looking at doing more of these. Why is this appealing to you at the moment, Henry?
Well, the simple answer to that is because it is hands off. You know, they rent the property and you get a hands-off deal. And, you know, I've always dreamed about having hands-off property in business. And I never thought it would become a reality. And you see lots of people on the internet saying, oh, property is hands-off. Now, these are people not even talking about supported living or, you know, and I look at those posts and think, oh my God, what a load of rubbish. I wish, please give me hands-off model. So that would be, you know, as you know from speaking to other developers, that would be the main advantage, I would say. And obviously, you know, the fact that you're giving your property to a valuable, the right use and a good use for the community it's good too. It makes me feel better, basically, about myself. It makes me feel better about making a profit from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that also it is still cash flowing for you. Because I think some people message me and say, oh, once I've got my property business up and running and it's making money, then I will do supported living, as though they're expecting it to be sort of like a charitable donation somehow. But
Yes, yeah.
if they're set up right, it should still cash flow well for you, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, do most let's say supported living providers, because I heard, you know, a lot of them pay LHA rates plus 10%, but
Mm.
do most of them effectively pay market rent? Because I'm guessing to get a property, they would struggle if they don't offer market rent. They would just struggle themselves from a supply demand point of view.
It varies. So there are some it depends on the sector, depends on the type of
Yeah,
provider. Some will pay market rent. A lot of the ones I work with pay market rent. Some will pay LHA, like you said, plus 10%. Some will pay
Yes.
LHA rate only. It depends on what their funding stream is. If they're supporting people maybe who've been homeless, people who are not going to be eligible for higher support grants because they just require a few hours support a week, it's quite hard to justify above LHA rates. But then some organisations can top those up with things like charitable donations. They have other ways of topping up the rents to try and get hold of properties. Because like you say, it's very hard, very competitive to get property at the moment, isn't it?
I can imagine. Yeah, that would be a
And
challenge.
so the providers otherwise end up struggling to get property unless they can find a way. But then you can still, even if you're getting less than market rent as a landlord, if you actually work out your net income, by the time you're not covering voids and wear and tear and all the other bits that might be included in that lease, you may well still find that you're better off or the same with the less input required from you as a landlord. So I wouldn't always just discount if someone's offering you a lower than market rent. I'd sit down and work it out properly, you know.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And do you think there's actually more government support for this over the years, over the most recent years, or has it just become a more popular topic that's been discussed? Or is there actually more money being spent on this from the government treasury, for example?
I don't think it's that I'm aware of a strategic kind of policy decision that they're supporting it. But I think the reality is there's less social housing, and the reality is there's less available properties, and we've got a higher demand because of things that have been happening all over. So the providers are at a crisis point where they've got massive demand for the properties, but they can't get hold of properties. So they're having to think creatively, and that's why they're approaching the private rental sector more and more. Things like there used to be a lot of NHS capital funding for people coming out of hospitals with autism and learning disabilities or learning disabilities. And that's really under pressure now. There's a much smaller budget for that. So I think it's a matter of people having to think in a different way to try and get hold of the property. What advice would you have for people listening, like particularly property investors who are looking to get into supported living? From your experiences, what would you say to people?
Yeah, well, the first thing I would say, and I always teach this in my NRLA training course, it's called the key to property investment. So if anybody searches the word the key to property investment, it will come up. So in order to there's a difference between a property investor and a property developer. So one is retail price and one is trade price. So effectively, I would consider myself a property developer. I would usually buy a derelict property where I can refurbish and reconfigure the building to a really good standard and specification. And then I create value in that. Now, a property investor would be somebody that would basically buy that property for me. It's fully rented and they're an investor looking for an investment. Usually they will get a letting agent to look after it, so they'll be hands off. So that would be the difference. If you want to get into property as a full-time business, sustainable business model, you have to become effectively the trade price, which is you have to be that developer. So my advice is to find buildings where you can add value. Personally, 10 to 12 rooms would be my minimum, because I find it's just as much hassle to do a 6-bed HMO as it is to do a 10-bed. Obviously, planning, is not easy for bigger HMOs. And, I've had a lot of planning battles over the years. But in the end, I usually get what I ask for, because despite all the negative press about the government, and I'm not promoting the government, this government, or any other government, the government have actually really tried to make it easier for people to develop properties like this under what's called permitted development, as you would have heard, of course, Lisa. So the advice is you have to create value and equity in that building before you even think about supported living. And then, assuming you've done that, my advice would be to do exactly what I do: start networking, contact everybody in the business they know, and understand the business and build relationships. And then, if you're lucky and you have the right property at the right time for the right provider, then you've got yourself a deal.
Brilliant. Thank you, Henry. It's been great having you on. I'll put your contact details in the show notes for anyone who wants to reach out to you. And I'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.